I've got a new toy to show you. It's called a bead mill. This one is made by Covington, so it's made in the USA. It'll make beads anywhere between 5/16 of an inch up until 3/4 of an inch. The lady I bought it from thought it was a spear maker. She tried to put a baseball-sized rock in there. She said, "Oh man, the thing's noisy." I guess so. Anyway, I do thank her for the unit. It's quite the machine. The process in creating the bead is cut cubes, little squares, then trim off the edges and make them somewhat spherical. The rounder they are, the faster the process will be and the less noisy. The unit that I have has 2 speeds. The low speed is for softer rock, and it'll run the mill at 250 RPM. The higher speed, or the fast speed, it'll run at 380. You can get single speed units. Don't know why you would. So this machine does work better with harder rocks. Anything above 5 on the Moss scale. Anything lower you got to be really, really careful with. Here's the tub. A mill head on it. That's the mill head. So it presses down on the rocks as they're turning around. So this mill head has a groove around here, and when it's running, all the rocks through centrifugal force will move out to the outside. Before it's running, you want to have enough rock in here to go around 80% of the way. If there's not enough of them, it'll be unbalanced and it'd be even louder. What you would do is run it with just the weight of the mill head if you're doing softer rocks. As the rocks get harder, there are 2 weights you can add. There's a 1 pound weight, just put it in the middle, or a 2 pound weight for much harder rocks, and it'll give a much more aggressive grind. So this unit is really, really simple. You can see it's got the electric motor. It causes this to spin with just a rubberized belt. To assemble it, drop in this piece, put in your rocks, put the mill head on, and you're good to go. So the material that you use to grind the stones is rock tumbler grit. Silicon carbide. On harder rocks you start with 80 or 100. On softer rocks you may do 220 or 400 grit. Round the rocks and then finish it with 600 grit. After that, put it in a rock tumbler to polish it. One important lesson that I learned really quickly is if a rock breaks while it's grinding, you have to open up the mill and take out that rock. Otherwise it'll jam things up. Now you don't actually drill the beads if you want to put them on a string or a wire until you're done polishing. That way, for one thing, you're not transferring grit from one step to another, but more importantly, you're not breaking your rocks. For these beads, I'm going to use some hard rock that I collected in Temagami, Ontario. This is banded iron, the red beam jasper, and the kind of silvery here being hematite. They should polish up nicely. They should make some interesting beads. So first step is we're going to cut some cubes. Just using a cheap tile saw. Now the next step is to just clip off the corners and make this as round as possible. Again, I'm just going to use the tile saw for that purpose, just the edge of the blade. Don't watch this if you are worried about fingers. So the key here is to grind this down So there's very limited flat spaces because in the mill they have to be able to turn. So let's keep going. So there's my rough, rounded shapes. Let's put these with some others into the mill and make some beads. We'll add some silicon carbide, rough tumbling grit, and enough water to make a slurry. Okay, let's add a 1 pound weight. So meMiner, can you hear me? So assuming the neighbors don't lodge a complaint, when are the rocks done? Well, simple answer, when they're round. And so here's my beads. They're all dry, so they really do need to polish. Now a few aren't perfectly round, but I don't think it's the fault of the mill. The problem is the material that I'd used here is Jasper, which is softer than the gray hematite. So they would have rounded at different rates. So the next step is you could put them into a rock tumbler or back into the mill. I'll put them back into the mill along with fine tumbler polish, so 500 grit, silicon carbide. It's very powdery, there it is there. Now we'll bump the speed to high and it'll speed up the grinding action. Okay, there's some of the beads out of the fine tumbler polish, also known as pre-polish. Let's get them polishing in a rock tumbler. So into the tumbler with alumina polish and water. And there's the beads all dried up out of the tumbler where they were polished, and then a short burnish, which is always good for rocks. The next step would be to make this a bead, would be to drill it. I think I'll keep them for now as marbles, or in Canada we call them alleys. Let's not drop any. Or Simon in the UK, one of the subs, will rightly say, meMiner's lost his marbles. Well, thank you so much for watching. We'll do it with another kind of rock soon.